2 Chronicles chapter 5. This is the chapter that Solomon brings the ark of God into the temple. Thus all the work that Solomon made for the house of the Lord was finished. And Solomon brought in all the things that David his father had dedicated. And the silver and the gold and all the instruments put he among the treasures of the house of God. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. You got to ask yourself. Obviously, the ark was stored and kept somewhere else, somewhere in the city of David. But when Solomon built a temple, or had the temple built and furnished the temple with all its furnishings, Solomon brings the ark of God into the table. And it clearly says, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David. Now, the city of David was just located south of the Temple Mount area. Why were they bringing? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I received an email, someone sending me an interesting link, according to them, about the location of the temple not being on the Temple Mount. On the video, an individual by John Muncie was teaching over an hour, trying to convince others that his theory, which is not his theory, by the way, it's been around for a while. Ernest Martin, Robert Cornuke, and I think the other individual was Ken Klein, he came in a little later, started all this over 20 years ago. He's just perpetuating what they proposed as a possible different location for the temple. And their location is in the city of David instead of where we see the Temple Mount today. And of course, the Temple Mount, according to them, is nothing but a fort created by the Roman Empire when they controlled the area. And their conclusion is because it's very similar to other forts in design and diameter. Well, not quite the exact same diameter, but just the design of the way it's laid out, which is nothing new. Forts like that, if anybody does their history on the subject matter, goes back thousands of years, even before the Roman Empire. It's nothing new. So they based their conclusion that the temple was located in the city of David, and what you see there on the Temple Mount was nothing more than a fort type area that the Romans created that housed 6,000 soldiers, a legion, and the support staff that was needed, which was about 4,000. So it held about 10,000 people in that area where the Temple Mount is located today. I'm not going to get into all the details, and I'll give you the 5 reasons why they think the Temple Mount is, not Temple Mount, the temple was in the city of David and not on the Temple Mount. But back to this verse. To bring the Ark of the Covenant, its temporary location, until the temple was built, of the Lord, out of the city of David, which is Zion. Now, why would they bring it out of the city? Were they all going on a picnic that day? Was it a custom to take it out of a location and to celebrate a new temple or a new location? In the scriptures, no, you can't find anything like that. That's ridiculous. I'm being ridiculous to make the point. Why was it taken out of the city of David? Well, the answer is obviously, if you read the chapter, because they're moving into the temple location, which should give you the first clue that the temple was not in the city of David. And of course, you read the rest of the chapter, it gives you a little bit more details. And then Solomon addresses the people. He also has a prayer. And then when you get to chapter 7, glory fills the temple, and sacrifices and celebrations. And then God appears to Solomon. Well, that creates a problem, doesn't it? Right from the get-go. Why did Solomon and the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord out of the city of David? For what purpose? I repeat, were they going on a picnic for the day? They want to air out the Ark of the Covenant before it's placed in the temple? Or whatever silly, crazy theory you want to come up with. No, because it's being moved to a different location. Now, here's the 5 reasons or theory points or main points that Bob Cornukes and Ernest Martin made up their theories and placed the temple in the city of David. 1, location over the Gihon Springs. We'll cover this. 2, the water for the temple was supplied from the Gihon Spring. 3, no stone would be left upon another, including retaining walls. 4, the Temple Mount was Fort Antonia. And 5, the temple was within the city of David. Well, I'm not the first one that's tackled this problem. In fact, others have gone before me, and I'm going to just capitalize on their research. Put up the first picture. When they do put up that picture, hopefully you could zero in on it if you're watching out there. It's a map of some of the digs that has taken place around the city of David. The Temple Mount would just be north of that, by the way. Now, Elliot Mazar excavated an area that you see there in kind of the upper center part of that picture on the screen. An area there that he excavated in red there. Now, Dr. Martin and Cornuke's temple happens to be in the same exact location where you see that red on the screen there in this picture. And this is the exact location as the huge royal building discovered by Elliot Mazar. Now, go to the next picture. Remember this picture in your mind, and if you could put both pictures side by side, that'd be great, but I don't think you could do that. Remember that red space in that first picture? Well, now you can see it right there in where the temple would be, according to Cornuke's and Martin's theory. The only problem is the two cannot coexist in the same spot. You have Martin and Cornuke's place temple, where you also find David's palace was found. And there's no way on God's green earth that David's palace would be located almost in the center of the temple. That would be an abomination if you really think about it. See, the problem is what you see there in red is factual, documented archaeological finds. The temple dwelling which you see surrounding that red portion is theory, with nothing substantial to back up that theory. You get it? You place that theory drawing with, according to Martin, his 600 by 600 foot temple area over the map of the city of David excavations, you have a problem. It lays out in the same location of Elliot Mazar's excavation area. And you find it directly under Herod's temple in Martin's drawing, the made-up drawing, not the actual finds of another building in the city of David. You just can't have two. The building has been proved, by the way, to exist. I'm reading something now to you, but keep it on the picture. The building has been proved to have existed in the time of King David, according to artifacts found in the layers of dirt of the excavation. And if you look at the picture, in the same place, based on the theory of Dr. Martin and Cornuke's claim, which they placed Herod's temple in that location. See, the problem is the royal building that Elliot Mazar discovered is definitely not the ruins of the temple, and stood in this place before any temple, if a temple was even built. And like I said, there's no way David would have put himself in the center of the temple or anything else except the temple. They both couldn't have existed at the same time in the same place. Continue reading. And the fact the altar which was built in the threshing floor, because you need that in the area, is over the edge of the cliff. So no threshing floor to be seen, just a stone structure. That's the next picture. Show that picture. That is no threshing floor, my friend. No way in God's green earth. And it's over the cliff. Of the archaeological finds, according to the digs, as they found them. What does this prove? That Martin's and Cornuke's theory of placing the temple in the city of David is wrong. And according to the archaeological digs, which they don't want to address, that's the problem, including this Muncie video, they do not want to address. They just want to give you your theory, and hopefully they convince you, well, because most people won't do the research. They'll think, they'll think that's plausible, that makes sense, without ever digging deep, no pun intended, into the facts. The work of Elliot Mazar has been published in several volumes and has been peer-reviewed for many, many years now. The archaeological, along with the scriptural evidence, is so strong for its being David's palace that it really can't be disputed. In comparison, Martin and Cornuke's have zero archaeological evidence to support their theory. So what do you have left, folks? Archaeological facts versus their theory. You got to decide which you rather believe. It goes on to say, need I mention that one wall of the temple was left on top of the other? Lots of walls left standing at the dig of the side of David's palace. Of course, they're using Matthew 24 in the beginning scriptures of that chapter, and if I have time, I'll get to it, where Jesus says, as the disciples were pointing out the wonderful buildings that they were looking at, and Jesus came back and said, not one stone be left on top of another. Now, when you look at the archaeological digs, now I think I have a picture of that. Go to the next picture. Let me see. There goes one of those pictures. What do you find there? Lots of walls. You see a person right down there in the top center of it. Lots of walls left standing at the dig site of David's palace. The area, their theory, places the temple of Solomon. I'm sorry. Too many rocks left standing. I think there's another picture also. Go to the next picture. More of it. And none of this, by the way, these digs, even gives you any hope of a temple structure based on what they found. These ruins do not resemble the temple in any way. In fact, the recent digs in this area, you can easily see there was no room for a temple anywhere in the city of David. Now let's move on to the water for the temple was supplied by the Gihon spring. Cornuke claims that the only water source for the temple was the Gihon spring, and yet Jewish literature tells us this is not so. The temple was cleansed by the abundant, never-ending water of the spring. Come back to me right now. The temple was cleansed by the abundant, never-ending water of the spring of Etam. E-T-A-M. Located near Bethlehem. Not the Gihon. And the water was transported to the temple by means of an aqueduct. We have three sources telling us truth of the matter concerning the water source. Many people try to claim that the aqueduct was not built until the time of Pontius Pilate. Yet the Jews of the 2nd century claimed the water came from the Etam springs and was directly routed to the Temple Mount. Number one, the Jerusalem Talmud says that the conduit, quote, a conduit ran from Etam or Atom to the temple. That's straight out of the Jerusalem Talmud. A conduit ran from Etam to the temple. If that is true, then it has always been the aqueduct bringing water to wash the court from day one of the temple being built. Logic tells us this aqueduct was rebuilt in latter times by the Hashmoneans and lastly by Herod. That ain't the only source. You go to another source, it says, how is the Azara, or the temple court, cleaned? Seal the area and let the water from the aqueduct enter till it comes clean like milk. That's from, I'm just going to spell it for you in case you're taking notes. Tosefta, first word. Second word, Pesachim, chapter 3, verse 12. How is the Asherah, or the temple court, cleaned? Seal the area and let the water from the aqueduct enter till it becomes clean like milk. 3. The Mishnah also tells us the water for filling the copper laver each day was, quote, brought by a conduit from the pools of Bethlehem. End of quote. They like to quote Josephus. And what Josephus left is so much room for interpretation, and what he was describing, you can take it any way you want. These are direct quotes from reliable sources. I'm not saying Josephus is not a reliable source. I just say it's too wide open for a correct interpretation. Now, there's all kinds of charts and maps, even videos on the water table for the Temple Mount and how it was brought in, and I'm not going to get into that. Now, Dr. Martin and those that use his word claim that the 10th legion was housed in the Temple Mount and claims Pontius Pilate built the aqueduct to bring the water to the fort. However, he combined two branches of the aqueduct system to come up with his theory. The Arub, A-R-R-U-B, aqueduct built by Pontius Pilate feeding the Solomon's pools, and the upper aqueduct, which was built to bring water to the upper city, most likely filling Hezekiah's pool. This was the upper aqueduct, not the lower aqueduct. Of course, from the sources I quoted above, which I just read to you, the Jerusalem Talmud says that a conduit ran from Etam to the temple. Then the temple court was cleansed by the water from the spring Etam by the means of the lower aqueduct from the first day the temple was completed. It is the oldest of all the aqueducts. Some try to date the lower aqueduct to the time of the Hashmoneans, 2nd century BC, having found plaster in some old coins that are Hashmonean, but I and others believe that merely repair section of this ancient aqueduct happened. Logic and the sources tell us Solomon was the one that originally built the lower aqueduct when he built the temple. Fact is, if the temple was always on the Temple Mount, then the water for it always came from the Etam spring. This aqueduct, after entering the Temple Mount, runs downhill to the El Kaz fountain. Just south of the fountain are many water channels that fit the layout of the temple. So don't be fooled by someone telling you that the Gihon was the only spring that could supply water to the temple, or that the lower aqueduct was built by the Hashmonean or Pontius Pilate or Herod. This aqueduct has been rebuilt over time, but we are only interested in the original builder. Let's move on because I'm going to run out of time. No stone will be left, the third theory. The no stone will be left upon another, including retaining walls. Have you heard that according to the prophets of Jesus, that not one wall of the Temple Mount will remain? This idea comes from misreading the Olivet Discourse. Jesus wasn't speaking about the walls when he gave this prophecy. He was speaking of the buildings that the apostles were pointing out to him, showing him how beautiful the building Herods were. In Matthew 24:1, Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up and point out the temple buildings to him. In Mark 13:1, and he was going out of the temple, one of the disciples said to him, "Teacher, behold what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." In Luke 21:5, and while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts, he said, in Matthew 24:2, and he said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." In Mark 13:2, and Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." And of course in Luke 21:6, "As for these things which you are looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down." They were walking away from the temple, going up to their camp up on the Mount of Olives. They would have to be part way up before they could see over the old east wall and view these beautiful new buildings of Herod's. The east wall was very old, being that Herod didn't let his builders rebuild it, so they wouldn't have been referring to that at all. The "not one stone upon another" is speaking of the new temple and new temple buildings of the chambers of the temple court. The Nicanor gate and the women's court, but not of the walls, just as when earlier Jesus had wept over Jerusalem, saying she would be laid even with the ground and not one stone left upon another. And yet the Romans left 3 towers and the wall they were on still standing to show the world how strong a city they had defeated. So Jesus was not referring to walls either. So the question to Bob Konuki would be, which walls would Jesus have been talking about if he had said anything about the walls in the first place? Nothing was ever said about the walls. That's the whole point. Point 4, the Temple Mount was Fort Antonia, according to the theory. Was the whole Temple Mount Fort Antonia? According to Josephus, Fort Antonia was approximately 600 feet square, and the temple was immediately to the south of that, and connected to it, and was also 600 feet square. He tells us that the two together measure 6 furlong, around 600 feet by 1,200 feet. In Josephus it says, while the entire compass of it was by measure 6 furlongs, including the Tower of Antonia, those entire courts that were exposed to the air were laid with stones of all sorts. This tells us the temple and Fort Antonia together only took a small portion of the Temple Mount we see today, not the whole Temple Mount. He also wrote that Fort Antonia was on the highest part of the hill, which is the Dome of the Rock platform. The temple was not on the highest point of the hill, but was below it between Fort Antonia and the city of David. 5. The temple was within the city of David. They claim the scriptures point out only to a temple within the city of David. Well, I already addressed that one. All the temple theorists use the same scripture to prove the temple location. In the beginning, the Ark of the Covenant was brought to the city of David. But as you well know, because I already covered it, it didn't stay there. It was just a temporary location, folks. Because back to 2 Chronicles chapter 5, Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the followers of the children of Israel, unto Jerusalem to bring up the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord out of the city of David. And when that happened, they placed the ark in the temple that was built by Solomon. From that point on, the temple was included in the scripture which referring to Zion, the stronghold. Can anyone really believe that the place where the ark then dwelt, and so God dwelt, was not called Zion? Not to mention, not accounting for the growth of Zion to the north to include Mount Moriah, when the temple was built and the ark brought into it. So don't be fooled by one person claiming scriptures point only to their theory. Concerning the possible place found in the city of David, the place of sacrifice, found in the city of David, this would have been a low place within the city, according to its location, and not a high place. The temple was built on a high place, the threshing floor. Because of this, there is possibility that this may have been a place of sacrificing to the foreign wives to make sacrifices to their gods. Threshing floors were never within a city because of the chaff that blew in the wind, and threshing floors to catch the wind were always on the high place. In addition to these things, Cornuke, Martin, and Klein do not mention the place of the trumpeting stone, for good reason, because it completely undoes the city of David theory altogether. According to the Jews, trumpeting stone is where they would blow the shofar. According to the Jews and Josephus, the place of the trumpeting was located within the temple. A stone with the words to the place of the trumpeting, with a nook cut into the huge stone for the priest to stand in while blowing the shofar, was found below the southwest corner of where? Not in the city of David, the Temple Mount. At crack, the pavement when it was thrown down to the first century street, which means it had not been moved. This is indisputable proof that the southwest corner of the Temple Mount was part of the Temple of Herod. Was part of the Temple of Herod. Can all these sources be wrong? These are historical facts. The Jews know, but many Christians don't know. The Christians are more concerned with hoping for a place that Jews could build a third temple without causing war than they are about these historical facts. Martin's agenda to find a place where the temple could be rebuilt without causing a war with the Muslims, and he either ignores or blatantly changes what is said in both the scriptures, the Mishnah, and by Josephus to force his location. And he's not the only one. But the Jews will not be swayed by the Christians to build their temple any other place than the threshing floor, which they believe is on the Temple Mount according to their own historical sources. And of course, this person has their own theory, which would be in the south side where the temple is located. I don't believe that also, by the way. Excuse me. I believe what I already preached on, what I already taught on way back. It was located in the Ark of the Covenant set where the Dome of the Spirits sits today on that Temple Mount. You look eastward to the Dome of the Spirits. Beyond those walls, which is a gravesite, Jesus is going to return, landing, his feet touching the Mount of Olives, and a separation will happen. He'll come piercing through that eastern gate that's blocked now. And who blocked it? Who walled it up? A Muslim, Suleiman, back in 1540 to 1541. Some say the theory was, and some say that the reason was because it was known that the Messiah would come through that eastern gate. Now, I know the eastern gate where Jesus walked through the first time on a donkey, which most of the Christian world calls Palm Sunday today, is below the eastern gate that's there now. They built an eastern gate on top of the eastern gate. That's a moot point. That wall is blocked up, and he's going to come piercing through that wall. And probably notify the world, standing where that Ark of the Covenant used to be, the meeting place of man and God, the high priest and God would take place, and say, I am the one you crucified. You didn't believe I was your Messiah, but I am the one that you were expecting and you ignored. And the rest of the world will have to take note too. You go to Ezekiel 43, and I know some will say this was the Millennium Temple, and I haven't gotten into that yet, but trust me, I will in the future. But I'll just read these scriptures real quick to you. Go to Ezekiel 40. Well, maybe Go 44. We'll start with 44. Ezekiel 44, verse 1. It reads, Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, or the outward location where the holy and consecrated place would be, which looketh toward the east. And what does it say there? And it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, This gate shall be shut. And since 1540-41, they've been trying to open those gates several times. They're still shut. And Ezekiel is talking about an end time situation here. This gate shall be shut. And what is it today? It is shut. It shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, had entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord, and he shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same. You go to Ezekiel 43, quickly, verse 1. Afterward he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looked toward the east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. And it was according to the appearance of the vision which I saw, even according to the vision I saw when I came to destroy the city. And the visions were like the visions that I saw by the river. And I fell upon my face. Over 2,600 years ago, the Lord declared the eastern gate would be shut up and would remain shut or closed until the Messiah arrives to open it. That has not happened yet. Over almost 500 years now, it's been closed. And we're possibly living in a generation that you'll see it open. Go to Zechariah real quick. And I'm almost done. Chapter 14. Verse 3. If you can't keep up with me, just write the verses down. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, and when he has fought in the day of battle, and his feet shall stand in the day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave into the midst thereof, toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley. Half of the mountain shall be moved toward the north, and half of it towards the south. Just before he pierces through that gate, this is where he's going to land. And just as Ezekiel prophesied, he's making a grand entrance, my friend. Now go to Psalm 24, and I'll end there. Verse 7. It's a prophetic psalm, in my opinion. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. He repeats himself. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. It's not a coincidence, though gates are shut now. And Scripture declares that he's going to burst through when he touches ground. Why do you think there's so many Muslim graves in front of the eastern gate? Because Muslims knew that Jews would never walk across a moon god grave. Well, Jesus is just not any ordinary man. Get that song ready. And he's coming through. He's coming through. Why? Because he is the King of glory. Selah. Think about what just was said. That's what it means. Selah. Don't fall for these phony theories. Archaeologically, they break down. That's why they can't base too much on archaeological evidence, because they have hardly any to prove any of it. Now, hopefully, I went fast, but hopefully you can listen to it again when it's available in the archives. I gave you enough information, and enough was laid out to show you that what's been contested for so long is once where the temple stood. Jesus is coming back, my friend. The King of Glory. And I can't figure a better way to end this 300 message, to focus on Him and realize, as we see through the Scriptures, He has history under His control. He allows things to happen so they can be fulfilled. But He has the final word on all fulfillment, what's happened and what's still yet to happen. And He's coming back. You got it? If you do, I want to hear from you. Play a song.